remains for me to ask you to give a very warm welcome to Professor Milton Mermikides, the Gresham Professor of Music, who will be speaking on From Thin Air. Milton, over to you, mate.
Thank you. Come on. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining me. Tonight I'd like to talk about music that does more than it should, which seems like a strange concept, and why it was so hard to actually name this lecture. What do I mean by more than it should? Well, we are sort of taught that when we put more into our music, we get more emotional effect out of it. That's why we go to music college. You start with one chord, and then you might learn some theory, so you add some functional harmony. You might even learn to modulate and add some twiddly bits, and then you make worthy, expressive music that we all enjoy. Of course, music doesn't work that way. Sometimes more is less. Complexity doesn't actually always mean good effect. Conversely, simple music can be the most profound and expressive music you've ever heard. And this lecture is really why that happens, how that happens. In fact, complex music has further to fall. And simple music can transcend its minimal means. I call this the cone of shame. And at the bottom is modern jazz. That was a joke, but as a jazz academic practitioner and lover, I am qualified to make that joke. You are not, I'm afraid. On this side, we have what we might call the cone of emergence. How simple music can become beautiful. How less can become more. And this lecture will explore that almost magical mechanism. So lots of music employs this. Process music, minimalist music, generative music, emergent music. In fact, all music does to some degree. So let's just think about it as simple but effective music. The first problem we have is how to define simplicity. How do we compare the complexity of two pieces of music? And we have two ways of looking at this. We could think about the informational richness, the sort of weight of surprise and information that's in a piece of music. And Claude Shannon can help us understand that, who invented the term the bit, 1 unit of informational weight. Basically, if you're playing a game of guess what I am, and you can only answer yes and no, how many questions you're likely to ask to get that way. We can also think about music as being generated by a code, a recipe, a score. And these two gentlemen, Turing and Shannon, were friends. One was working on sending messages. One was working on, of course, decoding them. They couldn't talk about this, even though they were eating together at Bell Labs. But they represent two ways of thinking about information and also thinking about music, the code and the content. So we can think of it as code and content, recipe and the result, instruction and realization, computation and information. There's this term called Mogorov complexity, which is the smallest possible code we can write to produce any result, or Shannon entropy, which is the sort of informational weight of it. In our case, we can think of it as the musical score, an elegant score, and the musical surface. How simple can we make the score? How informationally rich is the resulting music? So that gives us two ways of looking at musical simplicity. However, there's a complication, and that is that simple codes can create complex results, which means that simple scores can create complex music. Why? It's because numbers misbehave. Let me demonstrate, and I promise we'll get to music very soon. So if we start with any number, and we have just two rules. If it's even, we'll halve it. If the number is odd, we triple it and we add 1. Don't worry, it won't get complicated. So we start with 1, that is odd, so we triple it and add 1. 3n plus 1, that becomes 4. Very good. 4 is even, so we halve it. 2 is even, so we halve it, and we get to 1, which brings us back to 4, and we get this groove here. This, you may know, is known as the Collatz sequence, or the 3n plus 1 sequence. It's also called the hailstone sequence, or wondrous numbers. Why such grandiose names for such a simple set of rules? And the answer is because although 1 gets into this groove, 3 takes longer to get to that groove, 7 takes much longer. But how long it takes to get back to 1, if at all, is remarkably bizarre. So here's the end groove, but you can think of it as pathways leading to that end groove. These are just the first few numbers. We'll check the first quintillion, and we find that some numbers take ages to get back home. Others get home quite quickly. There are these pathways that go through it. In fact, we can't even prove that every number gets back to 1. We came close in 2019, though. And whatever we can do to numbers, we can do to music. I love this illustration. It shows almost like tree-like growth from such simple code. So I built this Collatz sequencer, which assigns notes to those numbers. So if we start with 1, we end up with that 1-4-2-1 groove. There's 4-2-1. Now I'm going to enter 3, and we'll dance away from that groove. But 7 takes a little longer to get there. Here's 7. 78 is one of my favorites. I haven't checked all quintillion. Famously, 27 takes forever to get back. Starts wandering up there for no reason. It's floating up in the atmosphere. Come back. Where are you going? Oh, we might have to just leave him up there. The point is that simple rules produce complex responses. These little animations are formed by just 3 or 4 rules. Conway's Game of Life. In the accompanying essay, you can find references to all of these. But you can see how they almost have lifelike properties to them. Complexity can arise from simple codes, and complex music can emerge from the simplest scores. That's why we see these postcard scores, just tiny bits of information that produce miraculous outputs, like in C by Terry Riley, or this beautiful Sarajevo piece, which glides between 2 chords over 15 minutes. I Am Sitting in a Room is remarkable because it has no score, because the instructions are in the audio itself. Super elegant. Now, the second problem is this. Not only can simple scores create complex music, but simple music can create complex emotional effects. We'll call that perceptual depth. So we have 2 ways that music can grow. It can grow from a recipe into the music itself, and also it can grow in our minds. It grows in the code, and it grows in our ears. So let's see how this perception can work. Take this simple rhythmic pattern. It's nothing in terms of bits. 2 long notes, 2 short notes. so it has a commensurate emotional response. We tend to respond to music through prediction. So you're probably grouping it in this way. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What if I do something like this? I haven't changed anything about the information, just moved these notes around, and you'll find that you get this. It might feel exactly the same, but it invites another interpretation of this pattern. The underlying information is the same, but the effect is more complex. Let's superimpose them. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. You can think of it as two phrases that make sense at the same time. All in time, all good, and collectively, all in good time.
All in time, all in time, all in time, all in time, all good, all good, all good.
And you can hear both together.
All in time, all in time, all in time.
And that multiplicity has musical effect. In fact, this rhythm is the core of the akon, a dance of the Ashanti people of Ghana. And you'll hear that all in good time threaded through it. In fact, it hovers between them, so you don't know how to interpret it, just like this Reuben vase imagery here. And we've been using this rhythm for millennia. All in time, all in time. You might be able to flip it in your minds. And it's that multiplicity that has power. And so this is both mathematical and musical. So we should go to the birth of maths and music, which is Africa, and look at the various ways this emergent power manifests, such as these earliest artifacts of maths produced. One is a tally stick, the other one is an arithmetic tool, 40,000 and 20,000 years ago, respectively. Or the beautiful sonar art of Angola. I'll explain how it works. A set of dots are placed in the sand, and in one continuous movement, the artist draws round them. They can't lift up, they can't retrace their steps, but they produce these astonishingly beautiful second-order simplicity pieces. A leopard with cubs. Here's some others. It's just so delightful, the sort of life forms that come out of these, like Conway's Game of Life. We'll just do one more because it's so much fun. Sadly, this is a dying art because it's not written down other than in the sand and in memory that gets wiped away, which is both tragic and beautiful, I believe. Oh, you caught that. That's good. But of course, that maths is also written in the astonishing music of Africa. And there are thousands of distinct music cultures and years of cultural development. So this is just little seeds of ideas that I've chosen to share. Such the interlocking and resultant patterns of the music of Uganda, which is played on a xylophone, one instrument with multiple players. So one player has a zone and may play a pattern like this in octaves. Another player would play another distinct simple melody. Nothing to it. although at the speed they play it, there's lots to it. But here's the thing. They're not played together. Remember, this is one instrument. They're sharing the same bars. They interlock. And we could think of it as syncopated, but that's not quite right because the music makes sense from both perspectives. They're equally weighted. We're not done. The third player acts as a sort of mediator between these two worlds. Sometimes playing with one, sometimes the other, sort of guiding the ambiguity. Here they are all together. And they change mode. Here's another change coming up. It's my favorite one coming up. You start hearing multiple melodies from this simple recipe. It's too beautiful, I think. Another mechanism is that of phasing or melodic phasing, such as the pipe vocal music of Mozambique, where it is both sung and played through a panpipe. The panpipes, there are several in an ensemble, but they generally have just 3 or 4 notes in them. But they're played in a cycle of sing, blow, and then breathe, because they're humans after all. So they sing, blow, breathe, like this. Another player will do the same, except starting on the second beat. The third player on the final missing beat. And all together, they fill in every gap. And then more people join the ensemble. So what you get is multiple melodies from these little simple seeds. And you might have a dozen lines joining together. You might think that that's a modernist hearing of this, but in fact this emergence is built into the music itself. Iwi children are taught to dance in 2 different ways to the same melody from a young age. And the Shona tradition have this instrument, the imbira zavadzimu, which means the imbira of the ancestors. And the idea is that because of the interlocking that happens in the ensemble and the multiple interpretations, you start hearing your own melody. And that is the voice of the ancestors whispering to us. There's so many pathways you can hear. So it's both collective and personal. And the timelines are probably the most astonishing representation of a simple object creating musical multiplicity. Here's one here, the Agbakor of the Iwi tribe. We'll hear it in context now. It can be played much faster, but this is the basic core element of it. Now, it's sometimes rotated, but it's been found all across the world now, particularly as it was transplanted, morphed, and speciated into the son claves, rumba claves, and the bossa claves. But this rhythm, this diatonic rhythm that's that I played you is not arbitrary. In fact, it appears in nature. How crystals form have a similar pattern. It's known as a Euclidean distribution. We find it in rock formations and even in tree growth. I'll explain it. Basically, it's a pattern that emerges where the objects stay as far away from each other as possible. Now, if it was on a circle, it would just be evenly spread. But if they only have certain places they can go, when they're in certain combinations, they just do as well as they can. That's why it's called maximally even. I find this analogy I thought of quite disgusting, but it's the best one. I think about urinals in a circle. And you stay away from people unless you're an absolute weirdo. So we have 2. We stay as far away as we can. 3. 5 gets interesting and groovy. 6 is even. And when we get to 7, there's the timeline. Now it's a cycle, so we can rotate it. Isn't that beautiful? Rotate it again. That's the bembe. And there we are with the Agba call. I just want to take a moment to discuss how beautiful this pattern is. It has a line of symmetry. And it has what's called maximal independence, which means that every position is unique, which means if you rotate it, it will create an interesting pattern and only become itself again in one complete rotation. It also has intervallic richness. If we think of the intervals between any of these notes, we have every one that is possible, 1 through 6, but a different number of each. Quite astonishing, really. Not only that, we have what we might call isochronic continuity, which is that we can draw the shape with lines of the same length, like a piece of continuous sand art. And that's a pattern that we've found 500 BC in a Neo-Babylonian tablet, incidentally. It has metric malleability, which means you have plausible meters, multiple plausible meters, so multiple interpretive opportunities. In short, it is a kaleidoscope of musical possibilities, and not just in the rhythmic domain. If you haven't noticed already, you've seen it all your life. And one person who saw the opportunity of that kaleidoscope is Steve Reich, who for 5 weeks studied at the University of Ghana with Gideon Olowoli, I think it's pronounced, and picked up many of his ideas here. But that picture is actually quite telling because drumming and tape loops are probably the core influence for him. For example, if we take clapping music, he uses the bembe rotation, adds 1 dot in there to mark the beginning, and this rotates against itself. Now, this wouldn't happen in this music. What he's actually doing is guiding the listener to show its rotational possibilities. It's more like a curator of listening. But he can do it with melodic material also. So let's take this excerpt from Electric Counterpoint And what you'll see is that there are different colors here, but the similar colors are the same material, just starting at different points in the cycle. So the first column, same material, just starting later, same with the second, same with the third, and then the two green ones at the top are the same. So essentially this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bits of material only. But the music it produces is astonishing. I hope you'll agree. But influenced by his work with tape, he also experimented with what we might call microphrasing. So instead of just jumping to the next position, slowly morphing to it. So here's piano phase, which is just one melodic idea played against itself. You'll see it indicated here in blue and red respectively. And what happens is one goes slightly faster than the other until it reaches the next position, hangs there, and does it again. And an impossible number of patterns emerge from it. I'll just start you off and then for 20 seconds and then guide you through a section later. That's the pattern. And then it's joined. Okay, I'm just going to take a little excerpt which for me produces incredible emergent melodies, and it's almost impossible to imagine that this is just one melody. So let's see what it happens to you. We'll give this about 60 seconds, I think, enough to zone out. What we start to hear, almost like natural rhythms that can be sourced from anywhere. So Steve Reich wrote a piece called Pendulum Music, where a microphone would swing and feedback. But I wrote something which is basically a sonification of multiple pendula. So in a sense, they're just algorithms that could be produced in any way. And what you'll find is a similar bubbling up of these emergent melodies. So each one of these 15 is a single note. We'll just start it off here. And again, I'll show you something later. And as they start to overlap, something magical happens. Music starts to emerge. This section here, I just start hearing bubbles emerging. And I say, easy to forget these are just 15 notes. And someone else who reached out in a way to nature to find this profound simplicity is Arvo Pärt. The illustrations here are used with kind permission by Jonas Sildre, who wrote this amazing graphic novel called Between Two Sounds, which is about Arvo Pärt's music. Thoroughly recommended. A little about Arvo Pärt, because although he's so popular, in fact, the world's most performed living composer actually keeps exchanging that title with John Williams. But it's surprising because he was actually highly experimental, serialist trained, with serialist training, and was highly controversial during his early career, certainly. I would say he was a liminal composer, two extremes. And a nice story is that he was self-taught on the piano, and the middle register of the piano didn't work. And you can hear that in his music. He uses the edges, both metaphorically and physically. He also worked as a broadcasting engineer, where he heard lots of a wide variety of music, and did lots of experimental performances. You can see him acting as a doctor here, doing a musical operation. Now, you'll be shocked to hear that this is Arvo Pärt, but here's an extract from a 1963 piece. Lots of entropy there. At the same time, he would write pieces like Solfeggio, this 1968 piece, which is nothing more than a rising C major scale. Not only is it a rising C major scale, but the lyrics are do, re, mi, fa, etc. An early do, a, dia. How does he make this interesting? Well, he doesn't do this. Although I don't mind it. What he does beautifully is he pockets, he spreads the melody between the vocal groups, the soloists or the vocal groups, adjusting octave as necessary, and lets them hang over each other so to produce this secundal harmony. That means one note apart. So you get this awesome array of colors, even though essentially this is the first thing you learn in Western music classes. These two extremes, these two sides of the piano, came to a head in this piece, Credo, in 1968, which some theorists have called his farewell to serialism. This piece was banned in the Soviet Union for two reasons. its musical anarchy and its religious implications, which is pretty good for one piece. I wish I could do that. And what I've taken is excerpts from the beginning and the end of the piece, where he goes from this extraordinary high entropy to just Bach's C major prelude accompanied by a choir. So I've cut between them, but this is the essence of the piece. Ready for the best chord in the world? Here it comes. Thank you. So he's sort of disillusioned with knowing how to do all this music, but not having something to say. He said he was a thief of music, he called himself, even though he was highly celebrated and highly successful. So he took 7 years without writing any music other than some film commissions for the money, but no public works. I've called it 7 years of silence, where he basically walked around looking for new music to find, of the sense I must break through some kind of a wall or a mountain, as if the right music is there on the other side. This quest for simplicity. Listening to the rain, as if I must tunnel through a mountain, something akin to life finding its own way. Here it is, even a little flower can grow through asphalt. Where does it get the strength? The idea of this emergent seed. It carries a seed within, can also be inside of that seed. He even took manuscript paper wherever he went. He didn't really compose, he just drew. Like a bird's wing. Not composing, but being a mediator. Man is not a creator of sounds, but their mediator. He mainly listened to Gregorian chant. As Steve Reich headed into the past to move forward, so did Arvo Pärt. In fact, we have this manuscript, this very page. Here it is. And you can see it's both natural and mathematical. There's the symmetry of that curve, and you might see a mirror here cutting out from it also. I don't know if he knows this piece, but there's a beautiful 15th century piece of notation which has a similar shape, making up a heart, both code and content. He was trying to reduce his music to something that said everything as succinctly as possible. All wisdom lies in reduction, he said. And in order to find that sound, he had to cut off everything he had learned previously. And he started to compose pieces in this way, with these little diagrams revealing their essence. Don't they look like the Sona art? It reminds me of the Eiffel Tower because it shows the construction within the piece itself. There's a transparency. There's a visible and complete process in these works. Take Sarah was 90 years old. You see that image he wrote of this clock turning. And this is the pattern of the rhythm that starts. You can see the algorithm clearly. And by cutting off these learned wisdom, I suppose, of music, he could do extraordinary things. For example, we think about a melody as being notes that are stuck onto little rhythmic twigs, and that's our melody. But what Arvo Pärt did was separate the twigs from the seeds. So he would have 8 notes on the stave, and then a 12-unit rhythmic cycle. And because 8 and 12 aren't the same number, I know this is high-level maths going on here, he would have to repeat the notes and sort of phase the notes against the rhythm, producing new melodies. So what happens is, from these just 8 notes and 12 rhythmic units, he produces this extraordinary pattern here. Now, you'll notice he repeats that green to the green across there, which ensures that every one of these melodies starts with a different color. He has completed the cycle. I'm not sure how he worked this out, but it means that you get every possible combination of these two cycles, and it's completely complete and revealed in his little sketch. It's almost as if the music writes itself. This Escher illustration actually came out at the same time as Shannon's entropy paper, as if he's finding a way for the music to write itself. For example, when we set text to music, we usually take those lyrics and we find music that makes us sound clever. But Arvo Pärt kind of took one step away and made the text generate the music. I'll show you what I mean. If you see the melody that he produces, you'll notice that it moves in waves. Can you see that? He even simplified the rhythmic set. He uses these 3 types of rhythmic units because he doesn't need any more. Now you'll notice that each phrase is actually the length of the word. So cantate is 3 syllables, so it heads up for 3 notes. Domino is 3 syllables that goes down for 3 notes. Novum is only 2. So the text is generating the music in this waveform. See how that starts on B flat, ends on B flat, and repeats it in this way, like a bird's flight. Now he adds other voices too. One way to do this would be just to follow exactly the same way, a parallel rendering, but that would produce a intervallic homogeneity because they'd all be fourths. Fine, but what he does is utterly beautiful, which he mirrors those movements, which ensures that the text generates this beautiful melodic response. And in this context, we can talk about his most celebrated technique, that of tintinnabule, which was influenced perhaps by the bells of his beloved homeland. On February 7th, 1976, Pärt was inspired to write this piece because one of his best friends was missing her daughter terribly. You see, her daughter was in London studying, but because of the Soviet regime, she was not allowed to contact her. So he wrote this piece for Alina. And what we get is this sad bell tone in the bass, and then this bare melody, no stems, you see. 1 chord, 2 chords, then 3. The 2 voices are matched perfectly, right? The top one, you can see that, is mimicked rhythmically below. You'll notice that the melodies are close but not identical. He said it was like a parent holding a child's hand at every step, just like these 2 humans were quantum entangled. Theorists have called the top voice the M voice, the melody voice, and the sort of bell-like tones, the T voice, the tintinnabule, which means little bells. But he later went on to say that it was like humans and the divine, so you can think of it as mortal and transcendent, if you like. Now, just to explain, the M voice can play anything. We can do what we please. But the T voice is always drawn from one triad, just 3 notes. So you get this tender pain occasionally where they rub against each other in seconds. Such a small but huge idea. I'll illustrate it a little bit further. Imagine this T triad is like this omnipresent set of notes that are triggered every time we do anything. Now, we could decide that, for example, the nearest note above in that T triad is rung as soon as we speak. Beautiful. Or the next position up, which we call T plus 2. Or T minus 1, the one below, or 2 below, or orbiting above and below, or displaced in time. Stupidly beautiful, doing more than it should. In fact, I've written some code that can just generate it. It's that simple. Even I can do it. You can play whatever you like and you get these lovely bell tones that emerge from it. And with this small idea and those others I mentioned, Pärt was able to produce this and still produce astonishing array of music that I wanted to talk about. And these are the ones I've left out. But I'll leave you with one. We have just enough time, I believe. And that's probably his most celebrated work. Because a lot of people like minimalism, but they tend to gravitate to sort of storytelling music, which people associate with this piece. However, I'm able to explain to you, in the remaining time, every single note in this piece. Firstly, it's entirely diatonic, F major, so it appears here on our axis. And you'll see that there's a violin note and then it's accompanied by the piano. And we hear a lot of these triads. So we'd assume, if we were studying at music college, that you could just harmonize in this way, in this generic manner. And it sounds fine, right? And it get you your GCSE. But what Pärt does is that he hides a transcendent voice in the middle of the piano. The middle note is always from F major. So you get this tender pain. That's the one. There are additional notes. Surely just furnish them on top. No, because everything in here is systematic and yet produces this beauty. For example, that little choice of having that hidden voice actually simplifies the music, but makes it more profound on this cone of emergence. It makes it more powerful, even though it's simpler. So he adds these notes to the piano, which I used to think when I first heard it were just added intuitively, but they're entirely systematic. You'll get a high note above and then below, displaced in time. I'll talk you through. So there'll be a high note. There it is, now a low note. Super high one. Now this is a very long note coming up, so it's twice as long in distance and in pitch. to have explained everything except the melody. Surely he just wrote the melody out, just felt it. Well, we see these A's, and they appear, they keep returning to them, these A's, and then there are these diatonic notes that fit in. Hang on. It looks like we get one note below, one note above, two notes below, two notes above. But it's not that simple. We have two notes towards the target, but then three notes away. Here's the melody illustrated. It's almost like there's a mirror line in the middle and also a vertical mirror. We should know that if you studied German at school, because Spiegel and Spiegel means mirror in mirror. And it's that emergent force that makes this simple music so profoundly moving that I believe is the same force that allows you to write a tender message on a postcard. Or the Collat sequence just dance around into atmospheric space. Or for the celestial objects to write in the sky these beautiful works of continuous art. Or birds, even with three simple rules to create such patterns. Perhaps it's the same force that guides their evolution, our consciousness, and maybe life itself. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.